story about St. Nick. Don't worry. I want to tell you, this is true. This was done by a research professor. I've adapted it for our time this morning, but it was done by a research professor for a seminary in Minnesota. His name is Dr. Kevin Bowder. He's a very much a research historian, digging way back into Bible times and studying the things that are available that connect with the Bible. Well, I want to talk to you about St. Nick. I believe in St. Nicholas. Levi, sit right by that tree there. No. Now I'm in trouble. Oh, well, if he decides to come up partway through, that's fine. Okay, here we go. I believe in St. Nicholas. There was a church in Myra. Now, Myra is a place in Asia Minor. It's mentioned in the book of Acts, chapter 27. During that time of great trouble for the churches, the church in Myra found itself without a pastor. Unable to locate a new pastor, the church asked for help from other pastors in the area. These church leaders gathered in Myra to pray and to seek God's will for a new pastor in that church. But they had no answers for the church that was looking for the pastor. So they began having a night of prayer. And as they prayed all throughout the night, they were asking God to send his choice as the next pastor for that church, as the very first person to enter the church building in the morning. Can you imagine praying in that way? Lord, whoever comes in the church in the morning when we are done praying, we will know that that is the one that you want to be the pastor of this church. Churches don't look for pastors that way these days. But they believed that this is how God was going to reveal to them who the pastor should be. Well, in the church at Myra, in Asia Minor, was a very young man named Nicholas. His parents were wealthy and privileged, and they were also Christians. Nicholas was reared in a Christian home. As he grew into manhood, he had many opportunities for important occupations to choose from. He sensed, however, that God had something else for him. He did not know what, but he began to pray for God to show him what God wanted him to do. And as he continued to talk to God, he saw more and more how unworthy he was to serve God. So he was a very humble man. After one long night of struggle, Nicholas determined, I'm going to go to the church to pray. Arriving early in the morning, he was surprised to find the building already occupied by pastors from other churches. When Nicholas walked into the church, the praying pastors asked him who he was, and he replied, I am Nicholas, a sinner. When the pastors heard his humble response, they announced to Nicholas that God had called Nicholas to become the next pastor of the church. And Nicholas decided that this was the answer to his prayers as well. Nicholas pondered how a young man could pastor a church during difficult times. He knew that Christians had to be taught to live by faith, but how could he teach people that? And the answer was obvious to him. He had to teach by modeling. And for Nicholas, modeling faith meant living in complete dependence upon God. That's faith. Shortly after becoming the pastor in Myra, Nicholas gave away all of his wealth and possessions committing himself publicly to live only by what God provided. Now the city of Myra was dedicated to the worship of idols. That was the city. There was wickedness in the city. They worshiped false gods. One of the false gods was the goddess Diana in Ephesus. And so Nicholas hated those idols. He hated those false gods that so many people believed in. But he had compassion toward the people who ignorantly were worshiping those idols. And so Nicholas determined to attack this pagan worship and to announce publicly that he intended to demolish the idols while he was preaching Christ. Many of the people of Myra abandoned their paganism and turned to believe in Jesus Christ because of Nicholas. He was a true worshiper of Jesus, the God-man, the Savior. Through the years, many stories have been told about Nicholas of Myra. Most of these appear to be just myth or just made-up stories. But some of the stories about how giving he was could be true. One of those that might be true concerns a poor man who had 3 daughters. And because there was a great need for the poor man and his daughters, secretly Nicholas went to the man's home and left a bag of gold. Nicholas repeated the generosity, and when he tried to give secretly again, the poor man was watching and saw him. And the story is that because he was caught giving a gift, Nicholas told the poor man about forgiveness that Christ gives. And the man repented and became a Christian. Now, whether that story is totally true or not, it almost certainly tells us of the kindness and generosity of Nicholas. That's why he became associated in myth and in stories. St. Nicholas was not a fat man in a red suit who drove a sleigh pulling reindeer. That character was invented by Thomas Nast and other merchandisers during the late 19th century. But St. Nicholas was a pastor. He was a man of faith, courage, and generosity. He was a true worshiper of Jesus Christ. Every indication is that he was genuinely a saint, according to what the Bible describes as a saint. And if anyone asks if I believe in St. Nicholas, I tell them the truth. I most certainly do believe. And then I tell them who he was. And more importantly, I tell them who he worshipped. And that was Jesus.